A couple years ago, I was diagnosed with tinnitus in one of my ears. And so I was recommended to do an MRI to see if there might be a cause of only having it in one ear instead of two. And I did the MRI, and unfortunately found a little brain tumor in there. Had some radiation treatment to stop that from growing. But after the treatment, I was experiencing some headaches. So the combination of the tinnitus and the headaches from the treatment really were a compounding factor and really caused me a lot of issues. Getting to sleep when you have a headache is really difficult when you got that loud noise and a headache. It was almost impossible to sleep. It was more of a question of how many hours would I lay in bed before I got to sleep. I wouldn't say I was giving up hope, but that thought was entering my mind that, how much hope do I have left that this is ever going to, improve in any way to where I can enjoy my life from here on out. Within, just a quick couple months, when your sleeping is not the way it needs to be and it affects your diet, all of my health was suffering, losing weight and everything. It was a spiral in many different respects.
Brad's case is unique in that he has tinnitus in just one ear. Most patients experience tinnitus in both, so when we see cases like his, typically an MRI is going to be recommended if we cannot see any other reason for why one ear would be affected by the tinnitus. In Brad's case, the MRI did show a benign brain tumor. This happens in like 2% of all cases of tinnitus in one ear. So it's a small likelihood, but it's important to rule out. Brad did have radiation for the tumor, and they were able to shrink it down to a size where they're no longer concerned about it. But unfortunately, he still was experiencing clinically significant or bothersome tinnitus and headaches. He hadn't been sleeping well for over a year. So this was greatly impacting his day-to-day. He was unable to work because he was unable to sleep. He was unable to manage. He was just in a really negative spot. Brad would describe it as experiencing a spiraling downward. I describe that, audiologists in our practice would describe that as being in the vicious cycle of tinnitus.
And it's very abstract for anybody else, be it your employer, be it their family or friends, for anybody to realize what you're really going through, because it's all inside your head. It's not like you have a broken leg. It's not like you're limping into home or limping into work where they can see what you're dealing with. My headaches are so bad I walk around with the ice pack on my forehead sometimes. That's usually how I start my day because of the headaches from the tumor. And so, sometimes they see that, but from the tinnitus, it's all inside. My daughter, I just went to YouTube and I said, "Do you want to hear what I hear?" And she said, "Yeah, I guess." And I went to YouTube and found the 70 hertz soundtrack. It's only 10 seconds long. I said, "But this is what I call my human dog whistle." And so I played it for her, and she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "That's what I hear." And she said, "How often do you hear it?" And I said, "All the time." And she said, "You mean it never goes away?" And I said, "No, Rachel, it's there all the time." And that's when it really finally set in to where she put herself in my place about how miserable life would be to have that high-pitched human dog whistle, as I refer to, always there. I did a lot of research. Frustratingly, it seemed like technology had hit kind of a roadblock. It seemed like what was currently available, was pretty much maxed and hit its ceiling as far as, cost and benefit. There was, some kind of benefit, but the cost was really high. I was really excited, but I was skeptical.
So like many patients we see, Brad came in to the clinic a little bit skeptical. We understood his skepticism. Like I said, we see it often when patients come in, but he was also excited and hopeful, especially after he and I sat down and I described to him and went over the science behind why a very fine-tuned sound therapy could potentially help Brad. And I think that's a huge element of a patient's success is the understanding of what are we doing, why are we doing this, and how could it potentially work. Sound therapy from Frequency Health. And really what I was explaining to Brad was when we can pinpoint where exactly in that frequency range is the tinnitus stemming from, we're more likely to be able to stimulate at a low level the areas that are being impacted in the inner ear. And so when you can stimulate precisely, we're more likely to see success. So just kind of for reference, a standard hearing test, we typically only measure 8 frequencies of hearing. But with Frequency Health, they developed this protocol and a testing platform called the Tinnitogram. And in a Tinnitogram, we have the patient in a soundproof booth. That testing takes about 15 minutes. From the testing, then we can develop the sound therapy. And so when Brad kind of understood how this approach was different than what he had seen and what he had researched in the past, I think it did give him hope. And he thought, what do I have to lose? He was extremely motivated. He knew he needed to do something because he was, like he described, spiraling downward. And he was definitely committed to the process, which really helped us get things going for him.
It's something that seems very abstract at first. You explain in detail, the scientific basis of it and how it breaks up the hearing spectrum into a lot more segments so you can better target the areas of concern. That made scientific sense to me. I was very open and excited to try it.
After the Tinnitogram, or the 15 minutes in the sound booth, we then develop the sound therapy file together. We do that by finding the 4 center frequencies for the tinnitus in each ear.
It's like an MP3 player. So with our testing, you have a custom track that you download into here, and then that track is modified as we've gone through our treatments to keep fine-tuning the hearing spectrums that give you the issues. One for both ears, and I put it in both initially. After about 15 minutes, this is more preventative on this side, and this is where I have my constant tinnitus. So I do about 15 minutes at least every day for preventative on this side, then I continue with the left side.
Even though Brad only perceived the tinnitus in his one ear, his left ear was his primary ear, we still stimulate the other side because we never want to promote transfer of energy from one side to the other, right? So we would never want someone to say, well, you helped my bad ear, but all you did was switch it over to my good ear.
Virtually every time that I do the treatment, and I stop, I notice a noticeable change in the volume. It gives me a peace of mind, to where if I do have a stressful, event or something like that, and my tinnitus goes up, or maybe a bad night of sleep and I wake up and it's, pretty loud, that I have that peace of mind of knowing I can go to my treatment, in 10, 15, 20 minutes, that's going to be decreased measurably so that I don't have to deal with it all day. We could quantify that the tinnitus was actually going down. And then I would come back, each month for a couple months, and we would take to the test. We kept on seeing a decrease in the quantified results, proving that it was working. And then we fine-tune the track to make sure we're targeting, the right hearing, the right parts of the hearing spectrum. And every month we're just progressively getting better and better and better.
Brad wanted to kind of give it a little bit of extra emphasis, so he did an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening. You can't listen to it too much. Typically, when the tinnitus is most bothersome is a great time to use it, which is why Brad decided to break it up in the morning and right before bed at night. Typically, people report when they wake up, the tinnitus is the loudest. That's probably because we're going from a state of rest and sleeping, and all our nervous system is more calm, to a state of arousal. We're awake first thing in the morning. It's usually quieter first thing in the morning. When we wake up, we don't have any contrasting sounds to the tinnitus, so we're more aware of it.
It seemed like it took a week or two for everything to start adjusting, inside my head. Initially, I noticed it gradually, just lowering in volume, and then the longer I did it, the more the tinnitus would be decrease for longer periods of during the day. Even without the treatment, was a lot better. Then within the first month, I would say, before I came back, for the second visit, that my sleeping was noticeably better, where I was getting to sleep much quicker. I was sleeping, much sounder, and I was sleeping longer. So just turning that into the right direction, right alone, stopped the spiraling that I was concerned about, that I felt like was out of control. So just in less than a month, the tinnitus went down, my sleeping, drastically improved. I could feel my whole, the way I felt like I was living day to day was just really turned around really quickly. I was so surprised.
With Brad, we saw in the first month some small gains already. He was starting to sleep a little bit longer. So in the beginning, he was having a hard time sleeping even, 4 hours consecutively. And we know he wasn't getting good restorative REM sleep because of the tinnitus. So when he came in reporting, I'm sleeping a little bit better, I'm feeling a little bit better, I feel like something's happening. I'm not sure what. That was all positive. And so we were really encouraged by that. We knew things could only potentially get better.
Yeah, I think the following ones were a little bit, fine-tuned better. So that's part of it why the progression, seemed like it was month 2 and month 3, we're kind of hitting our stride. And it was really seeing to where the treatment was having more of a lasting effect, throughout the day. And then not only that, I would wake up the next day and it wouldn't be as loud. So when you get that progression day to day, week to week, after a couple months, it's just a huge, huge difference.
When he came back at 2 months of using the treatment, he was definitely transformed because he was sleeping through the night. He was falling asleep faster. He wasn't having to use white noise or masking at night to get to sleep or stay asleep.
I look forward to coming back to seeing you because I wanted to see the quantified results to see how much we were improving, the natural state of my tinnitus. So I was actually looking forward to the appointments to see how much our progress, was moving forward. And there's something about our psyche when you feel like you're not spiraling and you feel like you're going the right direction. That alone gives you a sense of relief and peace of mind that you're going the right direction. I'm look forward to tomorrow now instead of, God, I got to deal with all this every day, and it's not getting better. It's only getting worse.
By the 3rd month, when we really had things fine-tuned, he had his protocol down to exactly, a science of how and when to use the sound therapy most effectively for his day-to-day. We knew we were onto something great here for Brad.
I mean, it's pretty amazing when you think about just listening to just a soundtrack that's, custom made for your own hearing spectrum can make such a measurable and noticeable difference after just a couple weeks, and then after a couple months, it was like night and day. My patient personality is back. Making jokes again, things like that I didn't do for a long time. You got to try it. It's so simple. It's not invasive. You can do it whenever you want to. It doesn't matter how busy you are. Be religious. Do it every single day. Give your brain a chance to adapt and accept the treatment. And then you'll realize that, holy cow, I never realized in a couple weeks, or less than a month, I can see this kind of improvement. And then within a couple months, you go, holy cow, I can't believe how much better it is.